This week on the video version of The Business of Tech, Microsoft 365 sells out and why we care, IT operations insights plus tablet, Chromebook, and cloud adoption, broadband impact to employment, the changing landscape of work and vaccination, the insurance companies on cyber insurance, security including the return of REvil and DarkSide in new form, and stories out of BlackHat. All this and more. Hit that like and subscribe, and here are this week's stories. The rising prices of insurance against cyber attacks fail to take into account the potential catastrophic effects of a widespread attack, Chubb Chief Executive Evan Greenberg said last week. Quote, "The pricing environment is pretty good," Greenberg said on a conference call, but that is not addressing by itself the fundamental issue. Like pandemic, cyber has a catastrophic profile to it. This from IT News. CISA has announced its vulnerability disclosure policy platform for federal agencies, designed to be a coordination platform with the security community. The NSA has also released guidance for securing wireless devices in public. Your cheat sheet, VPNs on public Wi-Fi, and two-factor authentication. The Justice Department has released that the SolarWinds attackers gained access to significantly more official emails than initially thought. 27 U.S. attorneys' offices were impacted, and all sent, received, and stored emails and attachments between May 7 and December 27, 2020 were compromised. Microsoft found that 76% of organizations are in the process of implementing a zero-trust architecture, up 6% from last year. The shift to hybrid work, accelerated by COVID-19, is also driving the move toward broader adoption of zero trust, with 81% of organizations having already begun the move toward a hybrid workplace, writes Vashul Jakal, Microsoft Corporate Vice President of Security, Compliance, and Identity. Barracuda has released data that says organizations face over 700 social engineering attacks on average each year, and 43% of phishing attacks impersonate Microsoft. So speaking of phishing, Microsoft is also warning about the bizarre call center malware operation. It's more dangerous than initially thought. It targets Office 365 and Microsoft 365 customers with a phishing email about an expiring bogus trial subscription, which then leads to a call to the call center to get the victim to install the BazaCall backdoor. The group can move quickly, within 48 hours of compromise. And DarkSide and REvil have reconstituted as a new group, Black Matter. The group is targeting organizations with revenue of more than $100 million, between 500 and 15,000 devices, and have not been previously targeted. The group has also listed off-limit targets like hospitals, critical infrastructure, oil and gas, defense, nonprofits, and government. So why do we care? Standard reasons to care are the landscape, trends, etc., plus those actionable resources. I was a bit surprised by Microsoft's 76% number, and then I checked to see who was asked, and it's security professionals, which makes this make a lot more sense. Those without a security professional on staff would give you a blank stare. That remains an opportunity in the SMB and mid-market, particularly for those companies who don't have internal security staff. The data does show the importance. Those in the know are moving to zero trust. Let's also highlight the insurance industry reaction. The chatter continues to be how unsustainable that industry finds the current situation. Even without regulatory action, IT providers' insurance will go up, and the audits will continue to increase. Better plan for that. AirBNB has announced a new tool for hosts, the ability to test and list their Wi-Fi speeds on listings. Integrated directly into the app, it uses MLab's open source software for the testing. Why do we care? So it's a feature, so I'd normally just move on. Then it struck. This is a great example of bringing technology into a business to solve a changing need. Understanding the speed of the Wi-Fi was not as important a requirement pre-pandemic, and now it is. It's this unique thinking that I wanted to highlight here, because when we talk about bringing business value with technology, this one books more Airbnbs. What feature can you bring to a customer? And next time you need to stay at an Airbnb, you can test the connection speed. With the Delta variant spreading more rapidly, and with the new CDC guidance changing many companies' approach to reopening, there's a new Gusto study on public health and small business. Here's the findings. States where COVID-19 cases have increased the fastest since the beginning of June have experienced the slowest employment growth. The data shows that a 10 percentage point increase in new cases is correlated with a 0.1 percentage point slower rate of headcount growth. The states with the slowest small business employment growth rates are Tennessee, Kansas, Mississippi, and Georgia. States beginning this summer with high vaccination rates are also seeing the strongest employment growth. We see that a 1 percentage point increase in the share of adults fully vaccinated increases a state's small business employment growth by 0.1 percentage points. The states with the highest small business employment growth rates are Vermont, Delaware, Montana, and Maine. Quote, "There's a relationship between public health and small business health," said Gusto economist Luke Pardue. Let's observe that the data does not say that bigger employment growth is happening because of vaccination rates. There are other variables in play. In that vein, Facebook announced employees will be required to wear masks when offices reopen, adding to their vaccination requirement. Disney has also made vaccination a requirement by the end of September. Walmart is requiring vaccination for workers at its headquarters, and Ford is now requiring masks at many locations. And within that landscape, a majority of active job seekers have explored new employment options in a different career field, according to a new report from CompTIA. Among current job seekers, approximately 28% of the workforce, 60% said they have looked at new opportunities in a different career field in the past 3 months. That compares with the 63% of job seekers who've searched for jobs within their current or most recent career field. The findings are nearly consistent across gender, age, education, and race and ethnicity. Why do we care? Now, there are a lot of variables in play. I added the CompTIA data because I want to highlight the continued difficulty of hiring, to then offer that most employees want to be safe. Companies also want economic growth, and this data does show there's a link between vaccination and that growth. Pulling from the study, quote, "In order to generate a speedy recovery and to avoid a costly COVID surge at a time when small businesses are just now making up lost employment gains, state, local, and federal officials should devote resources to help areas increase public health awareness." That leaves out what businesses themselves can do, which is also to require vaccination for employment. Both large companies and technology ones are leading here, which provides air cover for smaller companies. A reminder, businesses are legally allowed to require vaccination in the United States. There's a link between employment growth and vaccination, and the majority of the population wants vaccination, as evidenced by the number of vaccinated people. So, are you willing to lead? Microsoft 365 is now live and in market. A reminder, this is the cloud PC option, allowing a complete virtual desktop in the cloud. Tiers run from as low as $24 a month to as high as $162 a month, depending on the configuration. The cheapest setup is one virtual CPU, 2 GB of RAM, 64 GB of storage, and 12 GB of bandwidth, and the most expensive is 8 vCPUs, 32 GB of RAM, and 512 GB of storage, and there's a selection in between. Of note, Microsoft will offer this in a self-service model starting August 14th. And a heads up to administrators, Microsoft Defender and Edge on Windows 10 will soon automatically block potentially unwanted applications by default starting this month. Disabled prior by default, this will switch to on by default. Why do we care? Here's what I think providers are missing from the equation. While yes, it's more expensive than just building your own hardware, the service includes costs around security setup and management software, meaning this takes away from you, not your customer. Nerdio has a pretty good breakdown on the service, particularly comparing it to Azure Virtual Desktop. That's a more relevant comparison than with just purchasing a desktop. My take is that the real missing component for providers is they're focused too much on what they want versus what the customer wants. This isn't all use cases, but there are a number that are quite strong here. I'm pretty bullish on this as a component of the future of IT service delivery, and I note prices only generally come down. IDC with tablet sales data, Apple shipped 12.9 million iPads in the June quarter. Samsung shipped 8 million tablets, and Lenovo is in third with 4.7 million. The analyst is also warning of a slowdown to come due to chip shortages. And Chromebooks are up 275% year-over-year growth, up to 12 million. For the June quarter, that's 75% year-over-year growth. That data from Canalys, where IDC is reporting 68% year-on-year volumes. IDC also released smartphone data. Shipments climbed 13.2% year-over-year, slightly better than forecasted. T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon all reported solid earnings and strong business wireless growth for the June quarter. T-Mobile has additionally indicated it will be shutting down Sprint's LTE network next year, which is 6 months after the scheduled 3G CDMA shutdown. Synergy Research has cloud infrastructure market data out now, fourth consecutive quarter of increase, and it grew 39%. Everyone's up: Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, with the first two at record speeds, and Google slower and steady. Amazon has 33% of the market, Microsoft at 20%, and Google at 10%. And Canalys is showing similar numbers at 31% for Amazon, 22% for Microsoft, and Google at 8% of the market. And U.S. SMB and mid-market cloud adoption trends research by TechIsle. It shows there's likely to be a 121% increase in the adoption of vertical line of business cloud solutions within the next year. Top adoption growth will be for ERP solutions. Channel partners providing vertical solutions are 2.6 times more likely to be very successful than their less or not successful counterparts. TechIsle's channel survey research data shows that 60% of successful cloud channel partners emphasize their industry expertise and industry knowledge during their interactions with their clients. Conversely, 60% of not-so-successful partners lead with their technical knowledge, and 43% lead with price. Kaseya weighed in with their IT operations survey, quoting channel futures. The great cloud migration continues in 2021, as 36% of SMBs rank this as a top priority for the year. The most popular configuration is a hybrid public-private cloud strategy, which is used by 65% of SMBs. This is driving spending increases in this domain, as 54% of companies are increasing their infrastructure as a service spend, and 36% are devoting more money to SaaS expenses. The most common SaaS solution used by SMBs are Microsoft 365, 77%, Google Workplace, 28%, and Salesforce.com, 26%. At the same time, those legacy systems that haven't yet made the move to the cloud or other modern platforms continue holding some SMBs back. 24% said they're hampering growth and innovation by slowing things down and limiting what's possible. However, this problem may not persist for some of those SMBs, as 52% of companies are allocating a portion of their budget to modernize and update their legacy systems, which is the top driver for getting additional IT dollars this year. And overall, the U.S. tech market outlook is positive. In Forrester's recent report, U.S. tech budgets are forecasted to expand by 7.4% in 2021 and 6.7% in 2022. This in an adjusted report from previous reports, but still positive projections. Headlines from Tech Republic. Software will be the star performer in the 2021-2022 U.S. tech market outlook. Single Instant Cloud becomes a competitor to software as a service. And a key one, tech services will ride the coattails of software demand. Why do we care? Each of these growth areas has IT services dollars attached to them. This is a menu of opportunities to focus on. And more importantly, layer that TechIsle insight. Industry expertise matters. Going deep into an industry is proving to be a strong play for those who are embracing it, layering on top of the general opportunities presented. Want to ask, why do we care? T-shirts, stickers, water bottles, and even aprons. Pick up some of our great stuff at the link in the description below and support the show directly. As previously reported, Microsoft 365 launched this week, that cloud PC offering, and new trial signups have been suspended already. Why? Overwhelming demand, as Microsoft has run out of servers to support it. The company has paused the trial program until it boosts capacity. Interested users can now sign up to be notified when capacity becomes available or to buy it outright. Which is why I'm going to also cite this data published in CIO Dive. 1 in 5 U.S. professionals, 22%, say poor performing or broken IT equipment has meant a loss of productivity in the COVID-19 era, according to a study published by IT services company Velocity Smart Technology. The study surveyed 2,000 U.S.-based office workers. Almost 4 in 10 U.S. office workers say companies have made them wait longer to solve IT issues while working from home. Around half say they've waited at least 3 hours while an IT issue was sorted out. Hardware woes also hit workers during the pandemic, with 57% of respondents saying they experienced issues related to hardware replacement. Why do we care? Wonder why Microsoft 365 is going to do well? Think of how it solves the problem outlined in the study. And for those who are still skeptical of the pricing, let me observe they underestimated the trial demand and maxed out their capacity. One can guess they had a pretty sizable amount ready. Sure, that's trials, and sure, that's not everyone, but it's a lot. Those comparing the cost of a PC to this offering are missing the point. Compare the fully managed costs plus the implied offset of fixing the problem in the reported data here, and one can see how the value for customers is totally there. National Cyber Director Chris Ingalls on Monday made the case for establishing an office within the Department of Homeland Security to track and analyze cybersecurity incidents in order to ensure the nation has an early warning system to understand adversary efforts to target U.S. organizations. Later in the week, DHS unveiled the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, initially to focus on combating ransomware and cyber attacks on cloud computing providers. The goal long-term is to improve defense planning between the government and private sector. Included in the group, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. A Senate oversight report published this week reveals that the cyber defenses of key U.S. federal agencies remains inadequate. Inspectors found essentially the same failures as the prior 10 years. And it's not that the government needs cutting-edge new technology, it's that they have not allocated the budget or organizational will to implement best practices. IBM found that the average data breach now costs companies around $4.24 million per incident, the highest amount in the report's 17-year history. The average expense of a data breach rose by 10% in 2021 over the previous years. Breaches also cost $1 million more on average when remote work was revealed as a factor compared with businesses without this factor. Accenture says there's been a triple-digit increase in cyber intrusions in the first half of 2021 compared with the same period last year. The US accounts for more than 36% of incident volume, followed by the UK at 24% and Australia at 11%. Consumer goods and services is the top target at 21% of cyber attacks, then industrial manufacturing, banking, and travel and hospitality industries at 16%, 10%, and 9% respectively. While thinking about attacks, DDoS attacks largely target the US, per data from Atlas VPN. In June 2021 alone, more than a third of DDoS attacks worldwide targeted servers in the US. Who's targeted? The computer and internet industry, domain providers, web hosts, ISPs, and other online services, as the recipient of 83.2% of all DDoS attacks. The idea? Take out the infrastructure to impact business services. Also targeted, MSPs. Reuters is reporting on statements by the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure, indicating that having discovered how successful attacks on MSPs can be, quote, they are already busy, they have already moved on, and we don't know where. Also targeted, MSPs. Reuters is reporting on statements by the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure, indicating that having discovered how successful attacks on MSP can be, they are already busy, have already moved on, and we don't know where. Those researchers indicated they have discovered more vulnerabilities in MSPs who have not yet fixed all the problems. And it's not just Kaseya. At a presentation this week at BlackHat, security researchers presented techniques they have developed which lets them hijack Jamf, that Mac-focused management tool. Also from BlackHat, reports from the Coalition Against Stalkerware of a surge in the use of stalkerware in intimate partner violence and gender-based violence. Stalkerware is software made available directly to individuals that enables a remote user to monitor the activity on another user's device without consent and without explicit, persistent notification to that user in a manner that may facilitate intimate partner surveillance, harassment, abuse, stalking, and/or violence. Finally, directing listeners to research coming out from the Dolos Group. They were hired to test the security of a client's network. They received a pre-configured Lenovo laptop with the firm's standard security stack and received no test credentials, configuration details, or other information about the machine, and demonstrated they were able to gain access in less than 30 minutes with no soldering and just simple and available tools and hardware. Ars Technica with the write-up. Why do we care? Did that Senate oversight report resonate? Even the US government is not allocating resources. The IT industry seems to be waking up to the fact that it's a target. Sure, okay, let's go with that. I highlighted the Jamf story to illustrate that while Kaseya got all the headlines, the more important takeaway is constantly evaluating the attack surface of you and your customers. There's specific tactical advice here too. Getting the basics right is the first step, and so many aren't doing that. Then examine the further repercussions, be it in understanding how to address what the Ars Technica research finds or how to look at the implication of technology on things like stalking. It's a veritable smorgasbord of opportunity, although none are easy. Microsoft is now requiring proof of vaccinations for U.S. on-site work for employees, vendors, and guests starting in September, and they're delaying reopening until October. Real estate firm Redfin is also requiring vaccination, and those who have not been fully vaccinated will work from home. In that context, other firms are also changing their strategies. Twitter, LinkedIn, and Asana have all loosened their strategies about hybrid work per reporting and protocol. Axios has the same story, JP Morgan adjusting their plans, enforcing a daily health check as they stick to the plan to come back to the office post-Labor Day. Axios is maintaining a list of companies requiring vaccination, which has grown to include Tyson Foods, BlackRock, The Washington Post, Ascension Health, and Lyft, plus a longer list already reported here. Bloomberg is covering Amazon's dilemma, a concern that vaccine mandates would cause a mutiny among its workers, particularly those in warehouses. The company so far has held on to its previous plans of loosening safety restrictions and a return to the office for at least 3 days a week in September. Thematically, The Atlantic is saying much the same thing, with a focus on the management styles that thrive and those that don't in changes of work. So too Business Insider, although that focus is on how workers are fighting back. Quoting the article, in June, Bloom and his co-authors asked people who are currently working at least 1 day a week at home what they would do if their employer called everyone back into the office 5 days a week. 6% said they would quit on the spot, and 36% said they would begin looking for another job. Among those who were employed, 60% said they'd be more likely to consider a new job if it allowed them to work from home 4 to 5 days a week. At this point, working from home is so important that respondents valued it as an equivalent to a 7% salary increase. 52% of U.S. workers say they want hybrid work, per McKinsey. 45% of U.S. firms say they want to pursue such a model, according to a CNBC survey. And per McKinsey, 68% of firms don't have a clear hybrid plan in place. And pulling again from the Kaseya IT operations study, 42% say remote work is a major driver for their 2021 IT budgets. Why do we care? So, continued remote work. What's the rush back, particularly with the level of uncertainty? One of the key items in the Axios articles I pulled from is that employers haven't been clear if hybrid work means workforce or work week. Stay nimble. That plan for work, it's changing, but more importantly, focus on things that work for you and your customers and allow you to plan, but also execute in the now. Note how there's more money being allocated into remote work. If you don't know what you're running to, but run anyway, isn't that reckless? A survey from Consumer Reports out this week provides fresh insight into how Americans feel about their internet access, just as Congress hashes out its infrastructure package. The survey reveals that about 50% of Americans with broadband in their homes are dissatisfied with the price they pay, and shows that 75% of Americans support municipal or community broadband, quote, because it would ensure that broadband access is treated like other vital infrastructure such as highways, bridges, water systems, and electrical grids, allowing all Americans to have equal access to it, end quote. According to the survey, 32% of Americans without broadband internet service say it's because it costs too much, while a quarter say it's because broadband is not available where they live. A larger percentage of Black and Hispanic Americans than white Americans say it's somewhat or very difficult to afford their monthly internet costs. In a separate survey, 40.2% of consumers said they would consider immediately switching to municipal broadband if it was made available in their city. 10.9% of consumers said they would definitely make the switch. 23.9% said they would at least try it out. The Wall Street Journal covers the impact to carriers. The infrastructure bill could be good for them. The bill includes threshold of 100 megabits per second down and 20 up for new grants, which means coax and fiber can benefit from the funding. Many analysts believe there will not be significant market changes due to the bill. Two interesting studies cited in that article. The first, published by the Aspen Economic Strategy Group, found that universal high-speed internet service would raise labor productivity by 1.1%. Using results of a survey they designed and administered beginning in May 2020, the authors estimate that about 47.4% of full paid workdays were at home during the pandemic, up from 4.8% before the pandemic. The second study, by George Zuo, who recently received his doctorate in economics from the University of Maryland, finds that cheaper access to the internet in low-income neighborhoods makes people more likely to be employed. Showing the importance of broadband, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has new data on usage. 21.15 million in fixed broadband connections last year across those countries, with fiber now 30%, up from 12% a decade ago. That's eating into DSL's share, with cable being 34% the majority. Subscriptions were up 14% last year from 2019. Now, why do we care? It's tempting to consider broadband ubiquitous or something IT services companies can't address. Clearly not the case. There appears to be serious opportunity in municipal internet, both in deploying it and simply supporting it. It's also good for economies, particularly in those employment numbers, which savvy IT providers would recognize as more users to support. IT providers should want this investment. Think you can't do anything? Call your representative. You can. It's good for your business. Kaseya looked at IT operations maturity. Let's quote Channel Futures. Despite the increased focus on IT and their growing budgets, the maturity of these organizations varies significantly from one to the next. Breaking them down into 5 categories of maturity, we found 1/3 of them to be in the proactive category, where the focus is on streamlining operations and automation. Meanwhile, a shocking 47% of IT departments remain in the lowest 2 maturity categories, reactive or efficient. That leaves only 20% of IT organizations in the top 2 categories, strategic at 14% and aligned at 6%. This represents a huge opportunity for MSPs to partner with a vast majority of IT groups that are still struggling to reach a level of maturity where they're leading the charge in improving business operations via IT services, instead of just trying to catch up and keep their head above water. Why do we care? Shouldn't think this so surprising, particularly if you're comparing against the cybersecurity landscape too. Here's the flaw in the logic for me. Saying it's a huge opportunity for MSPs to partner assumes all MSPs can deliver those services. There are some that certainly can. Those that can't need to be looking at their own service offerings. When I put my ear to the ground and listen for chatter around improving business operations via IT services, that isn't the majority of what I hear. Now for those that can, they will pull further ahead and fast. Take a good hard look at where you spend your time. Globally, only 24% of women and ethnic minorities in tech roles feel like they have a sense of belonging in organizations, despite 75% of leadership executives believing the opposite, according to Capgemini. Research by the consultancy firm found that 90% of organizations worldwide are having trouble implementing inclusion practices and designing services within technology teams, despite an increased need for technology development as a result of the pandemic. Why do we care? I'm highlighting this data to not lose the thread. Thinking strategically, link this to broadband. Rollout of broadband expands the reach to new customers and new related markets, and as stated, some of that is Black and Hispanic communities. Address this problem while preparing to deliver services into those communities by preparing your organization to look more like them. I'm not saying it's easy, but if it was easy, everyone would do it, and the margins would be smaller. Hard is profitable. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSPradio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech, and I'll talk to you again next week.